So, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to go ahead with our concluding session of this 2 days international conference on 5G India 2022. And ladies and gentlemen, as we all are aware, this conference is being held in the hybrid mode. So joining us virtually is our distinguished chairperson for this session, Shri Yaduvendra Mathur, IAS, retired, Vice Chairman, Consulting Engineers Group and former Special Secretary, Niti Aayog. We, ladies and gentlemen, let's warmly welcome Shri Yaduvendra Mathurji. Can we have him on the screen? Yes, sir. Warm welcome to you, sir. Good afternoon. And I would like to invite on stage our distinguished and eminent moderator, Mr. Debashish Bhattacharya, Senior DDG, BIF. Let's put our hands together to welcome him. Thank you. Also inviting our eminent panelists, I invite Mr. Nuno Saraiva, Vice President Sales Consulting Oracle Communications. Warm welcome, sir. I invite Mr. Saurabh Singh, Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy, Nokia India. Warm welcome to you, sir. I invite Mr. Pradeep Bhardwaj, Senior Strategy Director, Head of Industry Standards, Cineverse. Warm welcome to you, sir. I invite Dr. C.S. Rao, Chairman and Co-founder, QuadGen Wireless Solutions Private Limited. I guess he would be joining us shortly. And Mr. Anubhav Bhatnagar, Associate Director, Private LTE 5G Networks, Tata Communications. So, ladies and gentlemen, the topic of discussion in this panel discussion session would be cross-sectoral digital infrastructure debate, and the time duration would be approximately 1 hour, 15 minutes or so. And before I hand over to the chair, our moderator, I have the proud privilege of introducing first our distinguished and eminent chairperson, Shri Yaduvendra Mathurji. He is the former Special Secretary at Niti Aayog. He is an IAS officer of 1986 batch who has served in various positions in the finance department in the government of Rajasthan. He has served as Principal Secretary Finance, Energy Secretary, Planning Secretary, PHED Secretary, and DG Revenue Intelligence. And prior to joining Niti Aayog, he has worked as CMD of Exim Bank, as Chairman of Indira Gandhi Canal Board, and as MD of the textile mill at Bhilwara, and also in ACC before joining the IRS in 1984. And presently, he is the Vice Chairman, Consulting Engineers Group Limited, and Principal Advisor, BIF. And sir, we once again warmly welcome you, sir. And
thank you.
Also, our eminent distinguished moderator for this session, Mr. Debashish Bhattacharya, whose Senior DDG Broadband India Forum is involved in advocacy for consulting for the past 3 decades with expertise in the field of technology, public policy, regulation, markets, and business development in the digital communications, satellite communications, and broadcasting domains. He has earlier worked with several reputed tech organizations and business houses in India. And ladies and gentlemen, we also welcome Dr. C.S. Rao. He's joined us. He's the Chairman and Co-founder, QuadGen Wireless Solutions Private Limited. Warm welcome to you, sir. And may I now hand over to our session moderator, Mr. Debashish Bhattacharya, sir, to carry forward the proceedings of the panel discussion. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists on the dais, and of course, our chair for the session, Shri Yaduvendra Mathurji. So, without any further ado, let us straight away request our chair, Mr. Shri Yaduvendra Mathurji, to give us his perspective on the topic today for the panel discussion, which is cross-sectoral digital infrastructure. Over to you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Really, I'd like to thank BIF and even Bharat Exhibitions for inviting me. You know, it's a real privilege to be in the midst of very distinguished professionals who are directly, delivering this transformation, not only of our economy, but globally and Even I'm sitting in Jaipur right now, and this is amazing the way the whole the whole digital infrastructure is touching all our lives. Coming straight to the issue of what we're going to discuss today, this cross-sectoral digital infrastructure, and is there a debate around it? Yes, there is, and the reasons we all are aware. This is a very erudite, knowledgeable audience, so I need not speak anything about the background, but definitely we can start straight away by talking about what steps are being taken by the government, or what steps need to be taken by industry and other stakeholders to ensure that we are able to actually impact lives and the ease of living. I think that large issue of impacting ease of living is probably at the center stage of policy making. The PM Gati Shakti, which was launched a couple of months ago, I'm sure some of us have been tracking this initiative, where the ease of getting clearances, and I'm told the number of clearances is, the pace of clearances for right of way really expedited, and even we keep getting good reports emanating. And I was talking to my batchmate and dear friend, Mr. Vagela, the distinguished chairman of TRAI, and he was mentioning how state governments have kind of taken up, and they're also doing their bit. Of course, more needs to be done to ensure that all pending applications for right of way, for rollout of digital infrastructure, and now particularly the challenge for 5G as the rollout is going to begin, has begun, auctions are over. So actually, I think the country, we're all looking very eagerly to see where are the gaps, where is there still either a regulatory gap, or there is an implementation gap, or there is still some confusion about revenue sharing models, and are we able to actually train not only inside governments, state governments, municipal governments, this whole issue of sharing of infrastructure. And if we do not share infrastructure, then definitely the rollout and the delivery, the impact would not happen. So this would need probably a lot of capacity building. And I'm delighted that we are sitting here today to look at this. So what are we doing as a body to actually bring in a little more communication, information, training, capacity building of all stakeholders? So the private sector with the government definitely should design more intensive programs around the challenges that would be there when we are sharing infrastructure, not only on the capex side, but also on the opex side. And there are issues of market distortion. So how does this cross-sectoral infrastructure sharing, specifically for broadband, where would there be issues around market distortion and legal and regulatory issues, together with voluntary or mandatory regulation, and the learnings around the common utility and multiple operators in an open access, that has to be really discussed, and we I would suggest that we should really get back to the drawing board to design these maybe 2-day, 3-day long programs, delivered across the country, where we actually promote and propagate this whole idea of sharing of the infrastructure to actually deliver enhanced levels of digital services. Particularly in underdeveloped areas, I know there are still challenges. The BharatNet, the rollout is slow. We thought public-private partnership. I was in Niti Aayog when we were trying to see that BharatNet utilization rates go up and what needs to be done. So still the action around the rollout of BharatNet and who will roll out the optic fiber. So those are issues now with SATCOM coming in. And of course, things are moving very rapidly, but capacity building, my sense is still to catch up. So while these around Delhi and other metros and in a smaller group, pretty very well informed, and we are ahead of the curve. But maybe when we come down to the state level, state government level, and the district level, that is where we need to somehow reach out. I would encourage my colleagues here in the discussion to throw their views on this. Without without taking too much time, I once again would like to thank the organizers, specifically my dear friend Debashish. Thank you, Debashish, for remembering me for today's session. I'm sorry I couldn't be there physically because we had a board meeting here in Jaipur and I couldn't travel. But I love to be, maybe come back in the panel. And with these remarks, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Those were excellent and very kind words. We look forward, we miss you today physically at the event and look forward to seeing you in the near future, in future events in a physical form. Having said that, I think I also wish to thank you for setting the context for today's discussions by giving us a perspective of how many different stakeholders need to get together to be able to deliver what is so critical called the cross-sectoral digital infrastructure, which is required to ensure that broadband permeates to each and every location and corner of this country. Thank you, sir, for setting the context. So with this, I would now invite all our panelists. We have a very distinguished team of panelists who will discuss the issue of cross-sectoral digital infrastructure in greater length. Before we dive into the question and answer session, I would like to introduce all my panelists, co-panelists here. I would like to start from the extreme left, which is Mr. Anubhav, Mr. Anubhav Bhatnagar. He is Associate Director, Private and LTE and 5G Networks with Tata Communications. Mr. Anubhav is currently with Tata Communications and focused around building private LTE 5G network solutions for different industry verticals. He's got 14 years of work experience in technology consulting and strategy, product management, and various large-scale wireless private networks. He has experience in developing strategy for adoption of next-generation technologies, defining technology stack, and implementing various 5G use cases for different industry verticals. To his immediate right, we have Mr. Pradeep Bharadwaj, Senior Strategy Director, Head of Industry Standards with Cineverse. Welcome, Mr. Bharadwaj. Mr. Bharadwaj is, as a Senior Strategy Director and Head of Industry Standards at Cineverse, he serves as a Senior Technology Advisor at overseeing strategic initiatives to advance the adoption of leading-edge technologies and standards such as 5G, IoT, mobile edge computing, LTE, voice over LTE. Mr. Pradeep joined Cineverse in 2005 and has built a career that encompasses more than 26 years of experience with mobile operators and telecommunication companies in the areas of GSM, fixed line, international, wholesale, international roaming, messaging, signaling, satellite data, and IP communications. His emphasis is on technology strategy, industry standards, systems engineering, and architecture. Among the leadership roles he has held in the industry, he has served as the chairman of the GSMA Hubbing Provider Interworking Group from its inception to its end. Thank you and welcome. We now have, to his immediate right, I have Mr. Nuno Saraiya, Vice President, Sales Consulting with Oracle Communications. Mr. Nuno Saraiva, I stand corrected, my apologies, is the Vice President of Oracle Communications Global Business Unit, Sales Engineering Team, responsible for leading technical sales globally. Nuno's technical sales responsibility covers the service provider and the enterprise core network portfolio of Oracle Communications, GBU, ranging from 3G, 4G, 5G, SD-WAN, and session delivery network portfolio, as well as steering the product strategy and sales go-to-market for the CGBU portfolio including the evolution journey into the cloud. Mr. Nuno has been in the industry for over 20 plus years, has worked on the communication service provider side, as well as on various network equipment providers, including Nokia, Nortel, Ericsson, prior to Oracle, and where Mr. Nuno has held various positions in pre-sales and associated management domain. He holds a master's degree on electronics engineering. Welcome once again. To my immediate right, the next panelist is Mr. Saurabh Singh, an old friend of mine as well. He is the head of government affairs and public policy with Nokia India. Saurabh is responsible for driving Nokia's public affairs and policy strategy in India in domains such as 5G, Industry 4.0, telecom security, testing, and Make in India. Saurabh leads Nokia's advocacy and partnerships with senior government stakeholders, industry associations to create a favorable political and regulatory environment fostering telecom and broadband proliferation and digitalization in the country. Prior to Nokia, Saurabh has led public affairs and strategic initiatives for technologies leaders like Cisco and Hewlett-Packard, as well as HP Inc. across multiple domains of digital India, smart cities, and IoT. Saurabh is an ex-entrepreneur, having co-founded an IIM Ahmedabad incubated VC-funded startup in the education sector, implementing innovative SaaS solutions. I presume this is service as this thing, for governmental and private institutions. He has a bachelor's degree in information technology and a master's in business management from Indian Institute of Information Technology and Management, Gwalior. Welcome, Saurabh. To his immediate right and to the last speaker on this right-hand side is Dr. C.S. Rao. Dr. Rao is the chairman and co-founder of QuadGen Wireless Solutions Private Limited. He also has been the former president and CEO of Lucent Technologies in India, a company which has now merged with Alcatel-Lucent and thereafter got merged with Nokia. Dr. Rao has had a distinguished career in telecom for almost 4 decades, if I'm not mistaken. In addition to holding executive positions with BT India, British Telecom, Intel India, Tel Labs India, C-Dot, and Reliance Communications, he was also president of OSPI, chairman of WiMAX Forum in India, and former chairman of the ASSOCHAM Telecom Committee. Welcome, Dr. Rao, to the panel. With the introductions out of the way, we dive into the questions straight away. I would like to start in the same order as I introduced the panelists. So my first question is to Mr. Anubhav Bhatnagar. Mr. Bhatnagar, the question to you is, which enterprise sectors are most prominent or most likely to adopt 5G technology? And what are the key challenges these sectors are likely to face with the legacy technologies? And what are likely to be the adoptable use cases by these enterprises? Slightly longer question, broken into 3 parts. You have 5 minutes to go for it.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I think I'll start with the very first question that you asked, that what are the major industries what are adopting this private or the public network. So as I'm coming from majorly looking into the private LTE or private 5G network, so the maximum traction what we are so the maximum traction is we are observing as coming from the manufacturing industries, and that can be into discrete or process industries, and they are the most looking towards the industry 4.0 use cases, adoption of the next gen use cases in order to get more in terms of the productivity, improve the OEE. So these are some of the key KPIs that the manufacturing companies look into. If I talk about the second highest, most adoptable enterprise which are looking for the private LT is from the oil and gas and utilities. So, and again, I will come to the what challenges they are facing currently and why they require this private networks to adopt and to enable multitude of use cases. So, having said that, like it's manufacturing, then oil and gas, utilities, into mines. So these are some of the key enterprises which are adopting the next gen technologies. Coming to the challenges that even our customers or the B2B clients that are facing is majority is is into the uh, less connectivity in terms of the coverage that they require in order to have a seamless enterprise connectivity. And that I'm talking from their perspective of enterprise connectivity. So now, as you know that the growth of data and the adoption of the next gen use cases such as like AR, VR based remote training or computer vision applications or drone surveillance. So these next gen applications generally require your robust network infrastructure. And that is the reason they are transforming their connectivity from the legacy towards private networks. This is the first thing. The second most important point, they are looking into the mission critical apps where they need the real time business insights, and that is the where they are uh, they are trying to exploit the performance of the 5G in terms of low latency, high bandwidth, and the beauty of edge computing. So that is the complete ecosystem that they require in terms of to enable these use cases. So some of the key use cases, even the companies are working on, as I already mentioned, into predictive maintenance or drone-based surveillance, or specifically in the mining industries. So these are some of the key aspects that we are practically looking into for B2B clients, and even lot of POCs or the trials are being happening in India as well. So far we were looking into the adoption of such use cases or the private networks globally, but now in India, the enterprise have the vision, have the strategy in order to go towards this kind of route. Apart from that, the other challenges that they generally face from the business strategy perspective, that is what level of capex and opex that these enterprise has to put in for these private networks. And there comes the bit balance that we have to make in terms of the capex that such an enterprise have to invest in, and what will be the opex running operational cost for years to come. So, so all these balance that we are trying to make in terms of providing the entire suite of network stack plus applications and so on and so forth. So from my perspective, these are some of the challenges that we are trying to overcome, leveraging these 5G and and most of the enterprises have already started implementing in their production environment, specifically in automotive as well as into mining in India as well. So thanks.
Thank you, Anubhav. I would now pose my next question to the panelist to his right, Mr. Pradeep Bhatnagar. Sorry, Mr. Pradeep Bhardwaj, I stand corrected. The question, sir, to you is, what, in your view, is the importance of ICT in the PM Gati Shakti program, and how should it be planned involving multiple ministries? And do you think it will help in the spread of cross-sectoral collaboration? So there are three parts to this question. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, and very good afternoon, everybody. I think, yeah, before we, get to discuss the specifics around Gati Shakti, I think, yeah, let us look at what 5G is actually in the first place. So I think a few years ago, I introduced, we look at 5G just as a technology. We look at 5G just as a system. And given the complexity and given the sheer and vast influence that 5G would bring to the table, I thought let us introduce a definition of 5G around it, which can capture and encapsulate this tremendous influence that it would have on the society. So I said 5G is an ecosystem of systems. It's an umbrella of technologies that would revolutionize not just the mobile industry, but a lot of market and industry verticals. 5G would become the cornerstone for the connected society and digital economy that we are aiming for as a society. So it would dramatically influence all the different aspects of the modern world. Now, the reason I say this is when we discuss Gati Shakti and the role it would play in bringing together operational efficiencies around the objectives that the government has set for these 16 ministries, to be precise, when I was reading more about it. I think 5G is a great example of being a collaboration tool, being a collaboration technology. And if you see in the mobile industry, I'm on the standard side of things. And 5G has been the biggest example of collaboration that the planet has ever seen at an unprecedented scale. So together we collaborate first when we write the standards, we co-create the standards, and then we compete with each other. So it's a great example, and the most complex technology we have ever seen. Together we created this technology in just over 4 years' time, which was again very unprecedented. So I think coming back to the specifics around Gati Shakti and the role ICT can play. So you have to look at it this way. Gati Shakti, what is Gati Shakti? Gati Shakti is precisely a vision for a digital platform for India. And when we say digital platform actually is a framework for the long term. It's an architecture for the long term, which can deliver these much larger societal objectives. But when you talk about ICT, ICT actually is not necessarily a architecture, not necessarily a framework. It is essentially a collection of tools and capabilities which can actually contribute towards this much larger vision for a digital platform called Gati Shakti. And I think to an extent, although all the 16 ministries are not yet integrated fully through this Gati Shakti, because the program has just been launched, but we are already seeing adoption of some of these ICT tools. I heard there is adoption of this special planning tool around some of the geo-modeling and things like that. So that is already happening. And increasingly, we'll see more and more of these ICT tools used to deliver upon these larger objectives. In terms of some of the specifics, what we can look at to make this more productive, I would point you to, so in GSMA many years ago, we had this, concept called Global API Data Repository. And what it was trying to do is to harmonize this vastly fragmented world of APIs. We know in 5G we are talking about not just the mobile technology or mobile service, consumer-based, but we are talking about delivering efficiency gains in mining, in agriculture, in health, and Industry 4.0, which my colleague talked about, and whatnot. Now, all of these are dramatically different verticals. They have their own specifics. So, and they have their own APIs and attributes within those APIs. So GSMA brought about common data sets for agriculture. So what is the soil quality? How much rainfall has happened? What's the weather like? These are traditionally the kind of things that would determine the efficiency gains around agriculture. Similarly, they brought in similar things around transport. So I think Gati Shakti should be looking to embrace and deploy some of these concepts to harmonize the data sets pertaining to each of the different ministries and their goals that they want to deliver in the Indian society, in the Indian context. And then not just harmonize, but then open up these repositories to third-party players to create a developer community around it, So people can contribute and innovation can happen and co-creation can happen. And I think that is when we'll start to see the real, the real fruits from this exercise.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bharadwaj. That was a great insight into the cross-sectoral work, collaboration work going on under PM Gati Shakti mission. Thank you. And your vision for that future. The next question goes to the person on my immediate left, Mr. Nuno Saraiva. Mr. Nuno, the question for you is, what will be the top 3 IT goals for Indian enterprises? How do you foresee the interconnection of applications, businesses, and cloud will bring about readiness of digital infrastructure, thereby enabling agility, resilience, and flexibility? Over to you.
Thank you. So let's start with the first part, the top 3 priorities for an enterprise IT. And I would suggest it would be these 3. Number 1, the capability to serve internal customers or external customers with a better user experience. So that would be number 1. Number 2, given what we've heard across various sessions earlier today and yesterday, the sheer amount of data that enterprises will need to process will force enterprises to increase the level of automation and increase the usage of analytics in their IT processes and workloads. And last but not the least, which is becoming a trend in the last years, an increased focus on security. With more data, with the ability to consume data which is not on-prem, more and more drives the need for a focus on security. So those would be, I would say, the top 3 priorities for any IT on the enterprise side, irrespective of being in India or outside of India. The second part of the question was, how would 5G or how would the infrastructure and the cloud intersect or help in that journey? And maybe starting off with cloud. I think cloud, and we can all relate to that, the expectation from the user has changed in the sense that people are accustomed to consume services from everywhere, right? So no longer I can only consume a certain service if I'm inside my enterprise facility or I'm connected to service provider X or service provider Y. The expectation is I can consume what I need to consume from wherever I am using whatever device I have. And I think cloud has been quite critical to achieve that goal. At the same time, cloud also allows us to explore, for example, I mentioned earlier, scenarios regarding automation and analytics usage. Cloud gives us the power to, rather than invest in very heavy on-prem infrastructure to run high workloads of analytics, for example, which tend to be very CPU intensive. If these are, let's say, occasional in nature, it lends itself very well to be run from the cloud, right? So I truly believe cloud plays a key part on this specific topic. And then in general on the infrastructure, and it's all tied, understanding that the expectation bar setting is higher and higher from the enterprise users, the infrastructure needs to cope with that, right? The expectation is lower bandwidth, faster speeds, extra resilience, right? And 5G in particular, in the context of this conference, does provide all of that. So I do believe they are tightly integrated. One drives the other. I think the enterprise demands will basically drive cloud consumption, will drive the infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nuno. Thank you very much. I now pose my next question to the panelist to my immediate right, Mr. Saurabh. Mr. Saurabh, the question for you is, what is the importance of standards in the area of street furniture and small cells for 5G? This is a single question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you that it does not have many parts to it, because just remembering the question has become a big deal sometimes. But thank you so much for the opportunity, and it's a pleasure to be here amongst the distinguished panelists. So first of all, I mean, before even I answer or begin to answer that question, let me take a step back and reiterate what our Prime Minister just mentioned a couple of months back. I hope I'm audible enough here. Mentioned just a couple of months back, saying that 5G has the potential to add 450 billion US dollars to Indian economy in the next 15 years. And that is a significant number. But personally, if you ask me, I believe it has the potential to do double that. Because we are growing at a much faster pace. We are the fifth largest economy right now. We are going for the third largest economy position. We hope that in next 10 years time or even earlier than that, we'll be a 10 trillion plus dollar economy. So if you look at the scale and the speed we are going and the potential of 5G in areas that our esteemed panelists just mentioned in the all across the sectors, manufacturing, digital retail, V2X, I saw a fantastic presentation by Reliance earlier. So all the estimates that we are doing are too conservative, I believe, for now. So second point I'd like to make is that how will this happen? How will this be turned around? Policy should be an enabler, not an impediment. We have been speaking about so many times. The pace of densification of network is only going to increase with all the use cases that have been mentioned, all the demand that is coming in, not from individual users, from industries, for seamless connectivity, ubiquitous connectivity. You are going through a tunnel, you are going through an airport, you are going through a bus station, railway station. You go into an enterprise premises, you go into a dense mall or network or of buildings. I think the expectation for drop-in connection would be, or the tolerance for drop-in connections will be less and less, especially with the advent of 5G. So here, what becomes then important is having the set of standards or specifications that can lead to quick deployment or densification of networks. And when we talk about standards and specifications, we are not only talking about product standards like what would be power, height, weight, these kind of specifications, but what will be the implementation specifications? If a new smart city project is coming up, then what is needed, or what codes of practice or standard procedures are already needed for it to be there, so that very quickly it could be deployed up, or the provisions is already made, so when the operators come in and they want to deploy, they do not have to go in asking for permissions, they do not have to, they can just look at the portal that we are talking about and see that, okay, this is available and this is how we can go about doing it. Because from the global experience, another number I'll tell you we have seen is that for small cells, 90% of total cost of ownership is from deployments. That is interesting figures that are coming out from some of our global deployments and examples that we've seen. So yes, it is going to be standard specifications for rollout, for implementations are going to be very important. How we can do it quickly as a nation, I don't think we can afford inefficiency, because if we were the first in and we are first into 5G and we are trying out new things, we could say, okay, we'll try an experiment. I don't think there is enough time now left for experiments. We need to move, we want to move fast, and that is why having those standards in place. And in fact, over the last year, it's heartening to see that a lot of work is now being done by DOT, TEC, and some of the other players on the small cells and densification of networks, and some of the reports that have come out. And it has happened in a very quick span of time. I think one more area where maybe the state governments also need to step up, that is important. We've seen some initiative from the Kerala government, Kerala State Electricity Board, but I think there is more needed there. So yes, I would say there is a lot to be done and a lot to be done fast. Yeah.
Thank you, Saurabh. That was very great insight into the area of street furniture and small cells, which is so important for densification required for 5G. My next question goes to the panelist on the extreme right, Dr. C.S. Rao. Sir, my question to you is, what, in your opinion, can be done in terms of active cooperation from the non-telco or non-telecom actors, such as government departments, both at the center and state, utilities, local and municipal authorities, for ensuring deployment of fibers, tower, and power infrastructuring, and also, I repeat what I had asked Mr. Saurabh also, which is small cells and street furniture for efficient 5G infrastructure creation to meet the densification requirements. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Debashish. I think all the earlier speakers also addressed the same question. I think even the Mr. Edwin also mentioned about cross-sectoral. I think what is required is there are resources in terms of fiber, resources in terms of spectrum for private networks, the fiberization requirements and the usage of the fiberization. There is a shared infrastructure. Apart from the fiber, the infrastructure of duct laying and how to share the duct. Then the role of the BharatNet from the DOT. And of course, the role of electricity departments, highway departments, and rural development department of space are all the interdependent departments for resource sharing, giving clarity on interworking, and all that is very much essential. As the cells infrastructure is becoming highly densified, I think the power extension to the lamp pole, where a small cell, just like a Wi-Fi access point, is likely to cover a 200 meters on either side or a 200 meters radius, that needs to be powered up. And that needs to be powered up and that needs to be metered. I think this is, the charges for that has to be paid. So how do we have that power utility measurement and payment is another big issue, which is very essential. And this I am saying it from our experience of doing an outdoor Wi-Fi in many villages as a part of BharatNet program, there are 25,000. The biggest problem has been the extension of power to those access points in village of 1 by 1 square kilometer. We have 5 outdoor access points, and how do we get the power extended to that? How is it measured and how is it paid for? The programs of BharatNet, we have come across another experience in Telangana, where they have laid some duct already, and the duct was asked to be used for blowing the fiber, and utilized it for various MSI partners like L&T, Starlight, and ourselves as implementing that. I think when you do that, the problems of what the duct is, whether the duct is capable of having a duct integrity test to be passed. If it doesn't pass, what is the, who owns the responsibility of taking the duct to be replaced and who pays for it? I think ultimately it's all about a quantified model of evolving a tariff structure which everybody is to pay until unless we do a quantified model evaluation for the infrastructure that are being laid, be it NHAI, which is thinking of putting something like 50,000 kilometers is what I'm told of optical fiber. State highways are doing it because everybody is realizing the importance of deep penetration of fiberization. So only way it can happen is to come out with a quantified model of ROI, IRR models, and from that a tariff structure has to be evolved. A publicized tariff structure should be there so that the private networks as well as telcos can utilize that common infrastructure and benefit out of it so that the duplicated investments won't happen. And if a true 5G faster pace in the digital era, after all, what is digital era? Digital is all about fast-paced rollout. of technology, infrastructure, and solutions. I think in this digital era, if it has to happen, we need to come out very quickly with a model. And I sincerely request the BIF, for which I am also a party to that, just like National Silicon Mission or a supercomputing mission, we need to have a national digital broadband mission into which all these issues can be addressed fast enough. It is high time we articulate that. And this cross-sectoral topic that you have chosen for the panel discussion is extremely important in the era of 5G because of various departments, including the electricity, rural development, urban development, Ministry of Commerce, space, what have you. I think all this should be treated as one interdepartmental nodal agency has to come as a part of the digital broadband mission. And I somehow feel that there is a compulsory need for that. Only then, all the distributed infrastructure around the cross-sectoral technologies also, there are technologies available around satellite, around 60 gigahertz backhaul, around Wi-Fi, around 5G, around SD-WAN. And these are cross-sectoral technologies again, playing different role in access, transport, and core network. I think that cross-sectoral technology exploitation can happen if only we have a very robust infrastructure sharing policy, which is quantified, well publicized, not leading to any litigation. I think that's what is the need of the hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We now go back to the first speaker on the panel. I will now go through and request all of you in the next round for the next round of questions to kindly expedite your response because we are running short of time. Thank you for your cooperation. So my next, in round two, my first question goes to Anubhav. So Anubhav, you touched upon the enterprise sectors which are waiting to adopt 5G technology. Obviously, we are talking about private 5G networks. So I would like you to please touch upon what are the considerations that enterprises are likely to consider while adopting private or going in for private 5G networks, and what are the challenges that they are likely to face given the fact that the government has come out with a policy for private 5G. Over to you. Please make it brief.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I'll just touch base upon three aspects what we are looking at. The first is they are looking for a flexible consumption model. And when I say the flexible consumption model, that means it can be as a network as a service, or the new concepts that are being coming up globally is the neutral host networks. And I think specifics to that, Dr. Rao has just touched based upon that how we can leverage the digital infrastructure that has to be shared between the public operators and which can be leveraged for the private networks as well. Having said that, the reason and where it will directly touch base to those to the B2B clients is into their capex cost, which will be drastically reduced to a certain level, which is like kind of a concern for the medium or the small scale enterprises. That is one. The second piece is what they are looking as a unified service management. So and from the unified service management, they want to have the ability in order to gain the single pane of glass view of their entire network infrastructure. It could be Wi-Fi access points, it could be private network access points, or the other technology if they are using. And on top of that, they require robust orchestration or the automation layer, which runs across the complete life cycle management of their device infrastructure, or the service chaining that they want to have, the complete different applications, how they can provision a new service on top of that. So I think these are some of the aspects that directly these enterprises are looking for in terms of the connectivity, in terms of how they can adopt at a faster rate the private networks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anubhav. My next question is to Mr. Pradeep Bharadwaj. Mr. Bharadwaj, given the fact that there are new business use cases which are coming up in the 5G era, what are likely to be the new business and operating models that are likely to emerge in 5G? You can give us your perspective about what you think, as well as if you can also throw some light about what are the global best practices in this area. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So obviously we know that 5G will now be used for a whole lot of other things than just browsing and streaming and making calls and whatnot. And obviously that kind of brings to the fore the fact that all these different verticals, they have their own business models, they have their own operating models. So I think as a mobile technology, we will have to adapt to these different and sometimes contrasting business and industry models. If you look at regulation for that matter, as a mobile industry, we have been very worried about the regulation in the mobile market. But if you think about regulation in the automobile industry, regulation in the health industry, regulation in the agriculture industry, now there could be a scenario when all these different industries are actually embracing mobile as the basic connectivity fabric. There has to be alignment between these different regulatory regimes, and because they cannot be at loggerheads. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done, and which is already being done. So I come from the UK, and in the UK, in terms of best practices, in the UK, in readiness for, let us say, a commercial rollout of autonomous cars and self-driving cars, in whatever time frame, we can talk about 5 years, 10 years, we may argue about that. But there are extensive discussions and deliberations already happening on the regulation side of things as to how these challenges would be overcome. Because it is very easy to put a self-driving car on the road. That technology is already there today. I have myself sat so many times in these self-driving cars on the roads in the UK. In Canary Wharf, for example. So that is, technology is not a problem. Maybe we can, stability of the technology, we may argue about that, but the technology is already there. It was already there even 2-3 years ago, for that matter. But I think that is the challenge around regulation. How do we overcome? Because when you talk about automobile, insurance is very directly connected to it. Insurance and automobile are connected. What happens to the insurance claims? There are different types of automation in the cars. What happens around that? Because insurance also depends on what level of automation is there. So the reason I am mentioning some of these things, because the business models would have to, let us say, innovate. We talk about, to give you an example, we talk about private networks. It was mentioned a lot. Private networks is not just an operating model. Private networks is also a business model in its own right. But in terms of other examples around business models and operating models, you see, 5G is all about data. Data being generated, data being consumed, data being shared in so many ways. And secondly, there will be a lot of stakeholders. So when you talk about more and more data in 5G, there will be more and more data-driven business models, which are not necessarily there today. So we would see those kind of innovation around business models. When we talk about more and more stakeholders in the value chain, obviously what comes to mind in terms of business models would be revenue sharing. These stakeholders, they all want a pie. And those revenue sharing, reseller, those kind of business models will be there as well. The traditional, call it subscription-based business models, I think they will have to evolve significantly also. We would see more opportunities around media is one industry which has literally taken off big time in India compared to even some of the developed economies. And that is where I see a lot of innovation happening around sponsored, advertising-driven business models actually being put more to use as well in the 5G context. And then you have some other things. I think our chief guest mentioned the emphasis around public-private partnership. Public-private partnership also is not just a way of governance and co-creation. It is also a business model in its own right. So we would see those kind of new concepts also getting deployed in the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pradeep. My next question is to Mr. Nuno. I have a very short and a simple question. How do you see SLAs, service level agreements, being met on an end-to-end basis in a complex, heterogeneous network in the future?
Thank you. It's not an easy topic, but maybe just picking up on topics we've heard earlier this morning. So in 5G, with the evolution to both the infrastructure and the applications taking advantage to it, evolving to a more IT model, cloud native, maybe much more designed, considering the network or the infrastructure will fail, using, for example, architectures which are stateless so that failovers can be faster and easier to manage. I personally believe the dependency or the focus on SLAs will be less relevant, which will actually accelerate environments where you have multi-cloud scenarios where it becomes less easy to pinpoint where was the problem. Just coping with the problem, I think, becomes the emphasis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent response. My next question is to Mr. Saurabh. The question pertains to how do you see 4G and 5G coexisting in future? And do you see a mix of 4G and 5G? Or do you see that there will be unique use cases which will be supported by either of the technologies? And who shall make the choice and how? That is the question. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Devashish. So is it audible? Yeah, I think it is. So yes, I heard opinions of other panelists also earlier on 4G and 5G coexisting. Some of them were of the opinion that at least it will take 5-6 more years where 4G and 5G will coexist. What I'll do is I'll maybe give an example of our own factory. We have our own private wireless solution deployed at Nokia factory, which is one of the largest telecom product manufacturers and exporters from India. And we have fantastic use cases deployed in the factory, which is running on a 4G LTE network as of now. Okay. So in the 4G LTE network, what we have seen is we are able to bring it up to a very solid foundational level, where use cases on, say, machine-to-machine communication, getting all the data on your handheld devices, on the state of the SMT lines, or if there are some parts shortfall happening, if there is a potential error that is going to happen. All these kind of issues are getting flagged, and these are working beautifully on a 4G LTE environment. The next level that we will see is the use cases that we have implemented on the AR/VR training use cases we have implemented on digital twins. These can be wonderfully enhanced using a 5G solution. Okay, while 4G will continue to serve the needs of a large section of the people for foreseeable future, because the growth, the use cases, I think that is still to be tapped there at that usage of bandwidth level. But 5G will bring a kind of an urgency, a faster revolution. It will give rise to a wave of new startups. Our Prime Minister is also fond of saying that it is the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. We have 44 unicorn minted only last year, right? So when the 5G comes, this will be a huge fuel to the next set of use cases, because we have been talking about use cases a lot. to these next level of entrepreneurs and the ecosystem. So both will exist for some time to come, but the innovation, I think there will be a lot more innovation at the edge of the technology, that is 5G, that we will see, and there will be a lot more consolidation and growth in the 4G side is what we may see. So that is
Thank
my-
you. Thank you, Saurabh. Thanks a lot. Very interesting response. My next question is to Dr. C.S. Rao, and the question is, Dr. Rao, let me ask you, what, in your opinion, are the enablers and the bottlenecks that you see for 5G network infrastructure to proliferate across the country, and what measures government can take to ensure that this, the bottlenecks can be removed so that we have a faster 5G rollout?
Yeah, I think the enablers wise, I think one of the fundamental things, as we all know, is the fiber, is the spectrum, and I think spectrum auctions are completed. However, in a few bands like 26 gigahertz or 29 gigahertz, the coexistence of the Department of Space issue has to be resolved so that that band, after all, 5G is all about building a capacity network and not a coverage network, and hence the emphasis should be more on making the spectrum which gives high capacity should be free from all encumbrances and interworking relationships and coexistence studies. That's one of the fundamental things that we require. In addition to that, I think to complement that, because spectrum is a very expensive resource, the second biggest enabler, as I see, on the spectrum side is the Wi-Fi 6 in the 6 gigahertz band to complement and work along with 3.5 or 4 gigahertz. In fact, even the 4 gigahertz is considered a platinum spectrum. It is available in Japan, in countries like that. And fortunately, it is available even here, but being used for very less number of strategic defense needs. If only that can be reformed and put to use when a country is having a potential of 500 million broadband potential around 5G era, each user expecting something like 100 Mbps speed and a consumption of 600 gigabytes of monthly data packs are likely to be a reality in this world. I think that's very much essential on the spectrum side. The second one, of course, the enabler is no doubt the Gati Shakti and all that has been really well thought out. But the reality is it has to hit faster in embracing that principles, and down the line, the departments like NHAI, state highway authorities, Ministry of Forest. In my example, where I am implementing a BharatNet project in 3 states, we were waiting for more than 16 to 18 months to get an ROW permission for 1,800 kilometers out of a total network that we are building, which is 4,900 kilometers. So you can see the percentage. I think, and this has been brought to the attention of USOF as well as the Department of Telecom Secretary, and they realized it. Things are happening, but it can't take so long. That's one of the things, if I may say. The inhibitors is, we are in the digital era, as I mentioned earlier, so we have to do a fast-paced resolution of the issues. So one is about spectrum, another is about infrastructure sharing, which is already talked about. The other one is about the cloudification and virtualization, exploiting those two technology. And we are a nation of software industry with applications, and softwareization, virtualization, and cloudification as the 3 pillars must be seen to be embraced fast enough through the right policies so that multi-edge computing platforms, distributed cloud or distributed data centers come up in every city, something like 10 to 15, if not more. I was talking to somebody, and that's the reason, because the population density is very high, subscriber density is high, consumptions are high, as has been put up by Geo in the morning with their statistics, and that calls for the evolution of distributed data centers, distributed core network platforms. So what is the enabler there? That's the enabling as a technology platform. But what is the policy requirement is the power, a clean power for such kind of things, and a fat pipe connecting to all those distributed core networks. And another enabler that is required is fundamentally interoperability standards. We talk a lot about open RAN systems, multi-vendor systems, but all of them have to have a very well proven standard global interfaces so that multi-vendor ecosystem, open RAN ecosystem with distributed points of presence of infrastructure can seamlessly work. And that's the fundamental enabler again, and you can see the inhibitor can be the other way around, opposite of that. I think that's, in my view, the other inhibitor, biggest inhibitor is, of course, we are a price-sensitive nation. So whether 5G service packs command a high premium which you and I are willing to pay to the telcos with an SLA commitment, if that has to happen, so then how do we see the evolution of that packs? Are we willing to pay 10% more or 10% less? So so that's the another way of looking at it, and for that we need a strong, robust, the value packs system to be evolved on the OSS and BSS platforms with linked to SLA commitments, so that the consumer, when he's asked to pay 10% more, he feels happy to pay 10% more with a service assurance and SLA pack tied to it. Otherwise, 5G will be, again, will be a technology like what we have seen 4G, but we haven't experienced 4G the way it is being experienced in the developed world of US, Europe, Japan, etc. That has to happen. I think we need to have a better SLA QoS requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That was a great insight. I have to confess that though we have such eminent panel experts on the panel, we are unable to make full use of them because of time issues. So with this few words, I'm now requesting, I want to thank each and every one of the panelists, and would like them to, I would like to thank each and every one of you, and look forward to having, hello. I look forward to having more interactions with this August panel in future, so that we can take the dialogue forward as far as cross-sectoral digital infrastructure in 5G is concerned. Thank you very much, all of you. And with these few words, I would now hand over back to Swapna to take the discussions forward.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, let's also take this opportunity to thank our distinguished and eminent session chair, Shri Yaduvendra Mathurji. He's been present with us throughout the session. Thank you very much indeed. And I thank our moderator and all our eminent panelists for their valuable inputs we had from them. I would request Mr. Debashish Bhattacharya to kindly do the honors of presenting mementos to all our eminent panelists. We present to Mr. Saurabh Singh. Thank you. To Mr. Pradeep Bhardwaj. To Dr. C.S. Rao. And Mr. Anubhav Bhatnagar. Mr. Anubhav Patna. Thank you. And may I invite Mr. Rajat Mukherjee to kindly do the honors of presenting a token of gratitude to our distinguished moderator, Mr. Debashish Bhattacharya. And may I request the panel for a quick group photograph before we close? Huh. And can we have our session chair on the screen so that he is also part of the group photograph? Yes. Yes. So we have our session chair also in the group photograph. Can we have him on the background, please? Can we have a session chair? Yes, that's perfect. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, let's have a huge round of applause for this session. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I would request, now you all can just stand. The photographer wants a picture with everybody standing also. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. You may kindly take your seats in the front as we, ladies and gentlemen, move to the concluding session of this international conference, 5G India 2022. And we have the privilege of having with us today for the concluding address, Shri S.K. Singhal-ji, DDG AS, Department of Telecommunications, Ministry of Communications. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as I invite on stage Shri S.K. Singhal-ji. And escorting him, I would request Mr. Rajat Mukherjee to kindly escort our guest onto the stage. And I would request Mr. Mukherjee to also do the honors of introducing our special guest today.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. And as we come to the end of, I think, what has been an absolutely brilliant 5G India 2022, the last one, because from next year it's going to be the 6G India 2022, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Shri Sunil Kumar Singhal, who is the Deputy Director General at the Department of Telecommunications, Ministry of Communications. He has joined us today, taken out time from his very busy calendar, and I am very, very deeply indebted to him for having taken out this time to join us today. Shri Singhal is an ITS officer of the 92 batch and has more than 28 years, my apologies, nearly 30 years of experience in the telecom and broadcasting sectors. Presently, he is heading the AS division, which is the Access Services division of the DOT, which deals with all the major licenses and the licensees in this particular area, and 5G, therefore, is of extreme interest to and relevance to him in the creation and execution of policy, etc. He has played a pivotal role in the development of the NDCP back in 2018, and at that point of time, if I remember clearly, sir, you were DDG DS. That was you in TR. My apologies. There you are. You see, it goes back so far. He has a vast amount of experience. I'm not going to necessarily take him too much time now. I'm going to invite Mr. Singhal to give his concluding remarks. So over to you.
So, good afternoon all, and I know that this is the concluding session, so every one of you must be eager to go back to the work or home, wherever you want to go. So I will not take much time, but once again, good afternoon everyone. So, first of all, I thank the organizers for inviting me this concluding session and providing me an opportunity to at least hear the last session participants. And I really feel that I missed all other sessions discussions, but I have already been briefed. So I have the understanding that all the sessions were very useful to the participants, and the program has covered all the critical issues which are required in the 5G, right from standardization up to the operators issue, and then the cross-sector collaboration, networks, technologies, all the critical issues have already been discussed. As we already know that the India decided to follow the path of digital India somewhere around 2014, and from then we have progressed with leaps and bounds. Just one example of a good use of mobile broadband, if I can weigh upon, is that in the month of August 2022, more than 6.5 billion UPI transactions have been conducted using the mobiles mostly, and more than 10 lakh crore rupees has got transacted with no delays, no cost to the users, very efficient way of conducting the business. So this is just an example. We can understand how the efficient wireless broadband can transform the India's economy. Now, since we all know that the digital India is one of the important program of the government of India, where the government has set the target that let the 1 trillion out of the 5 trillion economy is contributed by the digital India. There the 5G is likely to play a much bigger role. And reason being is that up to 4G, mostly the services were being used only for the telecommunication purposes. But now the 5G services will range across the sectors. And when it comes to the across the sectors, the DOT's role becomes important, that it get engaged with all other vertical ministries, and DOT has already engaged with all other vertical ministries. Now we are engaging almost with the 20 vertical ministries to identify the use cases, to put in place the proper institutional framework in the respective ministries, to put in place the proper policies so that the 5G could be utilized in those vertical sectors. So that is the one aspect. I will not take you through the whole journey of 5G spectrum auction, which is again one of the milestone in India's telecom history. As in last 12 years, it has never happened that in 6 to 8 months time, the TRAI, from the date of reference to TRAI, the auction get completed. Normally this process used to take more than 2 to 3 years, which has been now completed in 8 months. So that can show the seriousness on the part of the government to facilitate the rollout of the 5Gs. Now the corresponding obligation comes on the shoulders of the vendors and the operators to roll out the network as fast as possible. And I am happy to hear that most of the operators are working day and night to roll out the 5G services, and they intend to cover major parts of the country by the end of the next financial year. Now the question is, what additional needs to be done? Now, when we say additional, probably many issues have been discussed in this 2 days conference, and I'm sure the organizers of the conference would share with the department the outcomes of these discussions, which can be used for additional. But some of the interesting things which I just wanted to share with all of you, I have jotted down 3-4 things only. One is that as far as collaboration is concerned, the TRAI as well as DOT is actively collaborating not only for infrastructure purposes, but in all spheres of use cases, infrastructure, power sector, broadcasting sector, space sector, with all sectors we are collaborating so that how can we put to use these 5G services for maximum use or good for the country. Recently, what we have experienced over a period of like last 10 years is that as the technology is marching forward, we are moving towards the higher frequencies, and accordingly the last leg or last wireless leg is becoming shorter. So then in those cases, we need to have a very good infrastructure which is up to the curb and then inside the buildings. Both the purposes, recently the government has come out with the updated ROW rules, and I am happy that now all the states have aligned their policies with the DOT's ROW rules. In addition to that, in collaboration with the Ministry of Housing Urban Affairs, in the March 22 itself, we have come out with one of the very good piece of policy paper where the National Building Code has been amended so that the in-building solutions can be mandated inside the buildings at the time of construction itself. I am sure that will go in a long way for rollout of the 5G services. Dr. Rao raised about the need for the National Digital Broadband Mission. Actually, you are right, we require, and I am happy to say that the government has already set up the National Broadband Mission. And that mission is working to address all these critical issues with the state governments as well as with the operators and other stakeholders. And in last 1 year, after the mission or dedicated mission, I should say, a lot of fruitful results have already been noticed. The another thing where a good progress has been achieved is in mapping of the infrastructure using the GPS technology so that we can use the advantage of Gati Shakti kind of program in the department. Another point which was discussed in the last session and which is essential for the growth of the 5G services and telecommunication sector in total, we need to focus on the mobile edge computing and the distributed computing architectures, because then only we can fully leverage the advantages of the 5G technology. Otherwise, it will have a huge investment in the network, but returns may not be reciprocal. So if we want to make it affordable, then we have to make it friendly, make it usable for the use cases where the demand is. And demand is in the distributed computing. The business wants much faster decision-making capabilities. The users want a much richer experience of use cases. All that is possible through the distributed computing. So I hope the stakeholders will focus on all these issues. At the end, I would like to say that let us not treat it as a concluding kind of thing. Let us treat it as a beginning for the 5G rollout, and start working on all the, or listing down all the issues which are remaining to be addressed, especially from the policy side or government side. And I am happy to work with each and every stakeholder to address those issues as far as the licensing and regulatory and policy aspects are concerned. So thank you. Thanks again for providing me this opportunity. And I wish a great success for the next session of this kind of conference next year, when we will have much more experience of the 5G services also. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. And I would now request Mr. Rajat Mukherjee to kindly present a token of gratitude to our special guest for the concluding session, Shri S.K. Singalji. Thank you very much indeed. And I would now request Mr. Rajat Mukherjee to kindly propose the vote of thanks. So, vote of thanks, please. And ladies and gentlemen, I would also take this opportunity to announce the Data Center India 2022 event, which will be held on 9th of November of this year in the same venue. We would request all of you to kindly register for that and do join us in November, on 9th of November for Data Center India 2022 at the very same venue. And over to Mr. Mukherjee for the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much for this, and it gives me great pleasure not to wind up the session, but to say thank you to each and every one of the people who have made this session as terrific as it has been. The organizer, Bharat Exhibitions, Sashi, Ranjit, his entire team of people. I know at Broadband India Forum, we as the knowledge partners, we constantly work on trying to improve things. And we sometimes manage, we sometimes don't quite succeed all that well. I think today was an example where we did it right. Of course, there's always scope for improvement. To each and every one of the speakers who have come from all parts of the globe, thank you so much for making it here to share your experiences. To each
and of course also thanking all our delegates for your participation in making this event a huge success that it was. Thank you once again to each one of you, and with that we now close the proceedings. Once again, looking forward to seeing all of you participating in Data Center India 2022 on 9th of November of this year at the same venue. Thank you. With that, have a safe journey home. Good evening and namaskar.